How did you find out you were getting cheated on? A flirty text from a guy popped up on me while we were looking at her phone for a place to eat. He complimented a picture I had just taken of her. She sent it to him while around me. Bold. Also, this happened in the Eiffel Tower, only a couple of hours into what was supposed to be a 2-week vacation. We broke up before I found out. In my head, I thought the 6-year-long relationship just ran its course and I was even happy. I felt like I was gaining a true lifelong friend. 2 weeks later, I get a call from the other woman. She flew him out across the country to meet her parents. He gets there and decides he doesn't want to date her. Out of spite, she calls me and tells me about their 3-year-long affair. I still need a therapist to unpack that shit. My neighbor told me that there was an odd car parked in my driveway when the ex was supposed to be at work. A man knocked on my door and introduced himself as the husband of a woman that my husband worked with. He was there to tell me that his wife was having an affair with my husband. My husband never came home after that. He got an Airbnb and told me to get a lawyer. We had been together for 24 years. He hooked up with random girls when he was supposed to be at his mom. One evening at a friend's party, there was a girl who wasn't of our group, just a friend of a friend, and she went, "Oh, hi, remember me? It was so fun," to him. Phone bill. She was texting some random number 600 times a month. I thought I recognized the number, and when I put it in my phone, it was a buddy of mine. Kind of scummy. The other woman knocked on my front door and asked me to take my kid and get out so that the two of them could be happy together. I told her she could have him, but they'd have to go because technically I own the house. I then told him he was free to go. He did not go, sadly. She'd been dropped off by her ex who she'd cheated on with my ex-husband. That was quite awkward. When she left me because she got pregnant and thought it was a different guy's. Turns out I was one of 3 possible dads. Couple years later in a few paternity tests, and turns out it was mine. She stopped giving me hugs. Sometimes you just know. We were together for about 8 years, married for only 3. Crazy story, but we were living in an abusive scenario with another person, and she was what was keeping me sane. It was rough to realize she was cheating on me with this guy. I feel better now. Definitely learned over time that questioning yourself and spending time wondering what you could have done different is essentially pointless. He pocket dialed me while bragging about it to a coworker. The universe really had my back on that one. I got an email from some guy I met once at a friend of a friend's party. My wife was seeing his former housemate behind my back. He had been cheated on himself and was doing me a solid favor. Tipped me off with the address and said to check EasyPass in phone records. I caught and confronted her leaving the guy's house the next day. We're lucky we didn't have any kids. I've been divorced for almost 10 years, never been happier. Went on a solo trip to California from New York. My then boyfriend of 5 years was supposed to fly to San Diego when I arrived. Then we'd drive home together, pick him up from the airport, use his phone to pull up directions for our restaurant reservation. He gets a notification from a social media app he must have forgotten to delete. I ask him about it. He grabs his phone and deletes the app. Says it would hurt me more to read the conversations he'd been having with the woman, and that I'm obviously going to dump him either way, so he wanted to save himself the embarrassment of getting exposed. I made him call his mom and arrange to have his stuff moved out of our apartment. Told him to find his own way home. Finished the road trip home without him. When I got home, it was like he'd never lived there. Exactly how I wanted. Was using her phone for GPS while we were on a road trip. Because mine had issues, when she got a text from the guy we had been in marriage counseling about, who says she hasn't talked to him for months about seeing her tomorrow. 24 years of being together, 23 years married, 2 kids, a house. All down the fucking drain, and ruined my life for a guy who could pass for a real life Ned Flanders. Open up the tablet to play with it. Found an open email that I had never seen before. Read the messages between them. I've never been the same since. Divorced now. We were together for 30 years. The girl messaged me from an anonymous Instagram account, letting me know it happened while I was out of town. Maybe I wouldn't have believed it if she didn't provide specific details, like the type of car I drove that I had let the carless cheater drive while I was gone. I have long and straight hair. I saw all over his bed some woman's curly hair. I went to the bathroom and saw a bunch from the same hair also on the hairbrush which I used when I went to his place. He called me crazy and said no one was at his place. Her roommates called and asked me to meet them for lunch. Said it was important. I met them and they told me she had been cheating on me with her ex the entire time I was deployed. They showed me pictures back when you had to get pictures developed. They said I was a good man and I didn't deserve to be treated like that. They had collected my things that morning when she left for work and gave them to me. I drove to her work, walked up to her, showed her the pictures and demanded the ring back. She gave it to me and I left. Later she called me yelling about me, conspiring with her roommates, basically trying to make it my fault. She asked what I was doing meeting with them. I said, "It's called respect and closure and it sounds like this." I unplugged the phone landline, waited an hour, plugged in the phone and called the phone company, said I needed to change my number and never heard from her again. I took it really rough and am thankful for her roommates and the friends that got me through probably the darkest time of my life. The guy shot me a message on social media, said he was sorry and didn't know she was in a relationship. I bumped into him at a bar years later and bought him a drink. I had to work a night shift on my birthday. When I got home the next day and he came to see me, he was covered in hickeys. After 8 years together, he told me he wanted a break to figure out if this was what he really wanted. After I said no, it's either work on things or we end it. A few days later, he admitted he'd met someone. So basically, he asked me to hang around waiting for him while he fucked some other girl for a bit. Good riddance to that one. Had to cancel our plans as some important work stuff came up. Ended up wrapping up earlier than expected. Decided to drive to her place to surprise her. I was the one who was surprised when I noticed someone else's car in her driveway. Literally and figuratively. Me and the other two guys I worked with had it come up in conversation. She told guy A that me and her had broken up. And she told guy B that I gave her a pass while I was on vacation. You think she would have learned. Found out a few years later, she did the same thing with a couple guys at the gym she was working at the time. Those two guys showed up at her house and called her out on it. She was sleeping with her boss in the most cliched excuses. I really think if she'd said to me the passion and love was gone, we could have divorced amicably, because I was miserable too. But when she cleaned out our house and the bank account, well, that changed the dynamic just a smidge. Fuck you, Michelle. My Nest Cam picked up my dog barking when my soon-to-be ex-wife got home from dropping me off at the airport at 4 a.m. Turns out the guy was on his way to my house while she was dropping me off. She messaged me naked pictures of him in our shower. He tried to play it off like it was an old pic, but it was clearly my shower with my stuff in it. Some people have a ton of audacity and zero shame. He stopped smiling at me, stopped kissing me goodnight, stopped holding my hand. He became very short and impatient with me, mean, didn't seem to want me around, spent lots of time in his office, was on his phone a lot and would get messages and be smiling. Then he asked me for a divorce. I decided to snoop. I opened his laptop and saw all the evidence. It destroyed me.